A few weeks ago, I shared with you a sermon about some of my failed New Year's resolutions in years gone by, and I challenged us to go into the year 5780 with a renewed awareness of the control we have over our lives. I wanted to follow up that message with another confession to you all. What I asked you to do in that sermon is much easier said than done, and I really don't like preaching what I can't practice. So tonight, I want to further explore with you how the wisdom of our tradition might help us frame our lives and our actions as we begin another year. While we don't have much control over how our lives will end, we do have control over how our lives are lived. We know this instinctively, but how often do we forget it? And when we feel the least in control, we might even feel the urge to look up at the sky and shout into the universe, shout at God, or shout at ourselves. Seriously? Why me? Why this? Why now? The other day, I started thinking about what would happen if God ever decided to answer me. Why me? Don't worry, it's really not personal. Why this? Well, there's no real logic behind it. It just sort of happened. But why now? Honestly, I wish I could tell you. After I played out this dialogue in my head, I wasn't exactly comforted by it, but I wasn't at odds with it either. It's not my theology that everything happens for a God-given reason, or that events in my life are predetermined by something I might have done in my past. Progressive Judaism often challenges this theology. It's the reason that the American Reform movement removed the second paragraph of the Shema from its prayer books. The passage reads in part, "And it will be, if you diligently obey my commandments, which I enjoin upon you this day, to love God and to serve God with all your heart and with all your soul. I will give rain for your land at the proper time, and you will gather in your grain, your wine, and your oil. And I will give grass in your fields for your cattle, and you will eat and be satisfied. Take care lest your heart be lured away, and you turn astray and worship foreign gods and bow down to them. For then the Lord's wrath will flare up against you, and God will close the heavens so that there will be no rain, and the earth will not yield its produce, and you will swiftly perish from the good land which the Lord gives you." And my grandfather used to joke that he would happily take credit for any of the amazing things his grandchildren did in life. But the minute we did anything bad or embarrassing, he disowned us. We might sometimes be tempted to do the same thing with God. I'm uncomfortable with a God who will take away rain for our crops if we do anything wrong, but who will cause our flowers to bloom if we've done God's will. But at the same time, I'm also guilty of bartering with God during bad turbulence on a flight, that if I can just survive this trip, I'll recommit myself to being a better person and a better Jew. And maybe we've all had moments in life scary enough to bring us to bartering. And on some level, I know that God doesn't work this way. But on an emotional level, I don't want a God that causes my train to be late, but I do want a God that causes my plane to land safely. So what do I do with this contradiction? And how does it inform my relationship with God during these high holy days when God feels so much closer and so involved in my thoughts and my actions? One of the most memorable books I've read on this subject is called When Bad Things Happen to Good People by Rabbi Harold Kushner. In it, he writes, "God does not cause our misfortunes. Some are caused by bad luck, some are caused by bad people, and some are simply an inevitable consequence of our being human and being mortal, living in a world of inflexible natural laws. The painful things that happen to us are not punishments for our misbehavior, nor are they in any way part of some grand design on God's part. Because the tragedy is not God's will, we need not feel hurt or betrayed by God when tragedy strikes. Rabbi Kushner continues, the question we should be asking is not, why did this happen to me, and what did I do to deserve this? That's really an unanswerable, pointless question. A better question would be, now that this has happened to me, what am I going to do about it? Rabbi Kushner challenged us to shift our thinking from blaming divinity to empowering humanity, and he's hardly the first to suggest this. Decades earlier, Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik wrote in his commentary on Genesis chapter 2, the phrase, "and God completed," means that God finished God's work, but the world remained incomplete. When God created the earth from formless matter, God did not replace or fix the chaos entirely. Some of this chaos was allowed to remain, so that humanity, through its own effort, could strive to eliminate it. Humans were given the great assignment of completing the work of creation. Of course, this great assignment comes with many questions. How do we partner with God to complete the work of creation when we might feel hopeless in our circumstances, disempowered to act, or even angry with God? When the world feels broken beyond repair, when our lives feel overwhelming, where does God fit into the picture? And what kind of partner will God be anyway, if we're working on this Tikkun Olam project together? Rabbi Bradley Shavit-Artson gave me a new definition of God when he taught me about process theology. He started from the premise set by classical theologians that God must be omnipotent, omniscient, and omnibenevolent. So based on this presumption, God has and must have all the power, God has and must have all knowledge, knowing everything that ever happened and will ever happen, and that God is omnibenevolent, pure good. Process theology, in contrast, says that the world and God are constantly changing, constantly interacting, and constantly becoming. We are partners with the cosmos and with God in our own becoming. The past is offered to us, and God meets us in this moment, as in this moment we come to be anew. In every moment, we are coming into being again and again. God holds out a choice to you that you are free to take, free to reject, and then God meets you in the next choice with the next possibility. Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor and author, echoes the sentiments of process theology in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, although he might not have known it at the time. He writes that man does not simply exist, but always decides what his existence will be, what he will become the next moment. By the same token, every human being has the freedom to change at any instant. This is the language of choice and opportunity, rather than blessing and curse. Process theology offers no expectation of God's direct interference in our lives or explanation for why things happen the way they do. Process theology doesn't require anything from God. Rather, it requires of us. It asks us for what might be, for some of us, a radical reframing of our relationship with God, with the universe, and with our lives. It is not God's job to change our lives for us. It is our job to use our God-given free will to observe the choices we are met with in life, respond to them, and accept the consequences of our actions. So if it looks like we're doing the bulk of the legwork in this group project with God, then what's God's role? Just as we partner with God to continue the work of creation, so too we partner with God in upholding our end of the covenant. Our tradition grounds us in this reciprocal covenantal relationship with God that accompanies us through the multitudes of choices we face in our lives and keeps us in conversation with our values, our morals, and the rituals that keep us centered. Our covenant reminds us, Elohai neshama shenatata bi, tehora hi. God created us with a pure soul, and each day we wake up in a place of God-given spiritual newness. God gave us the covenant as a relational blueprint from which to build our lives, so that we, walking with this covenant in our back pockets, can live out what Torah teaches us in the way we relate to the people and the world around us, filled with the potential for positive, meaningful change. This season offers us 3 pillars on which we can lean as we engage in the work of creation and covenant together: teshuvah, tefillah, and tzedakah. And while these 3 actions are especially key during this time of year, they do not have short shelf lives or expiration dates. We can, and often we do, engage in teshuvah, tefillah, and tzedakah whenever we want to. The gates may close for another year when we hear the final Tekiyah Gedolah of Ne'ilah, but our capacity for return, for prayer, and for righteous words and deeds is limitless. We are reminded of this by our covenant, our liturgy, our Torah, and our free will. The same free will that offers us the option to either give up or keep going, begrudge or forgive, act or react, and, as Rabbi Soloveitchik puts it, to create worlds or to destroy them. As we spend these next hours searching our souls and asking for forgiveness, it's easy to feel despondent about all of the shouldn't haves and what ifs of 5779. It's also easy to fall into the trap of seeing ourselves as victims of our lives and of our circumstances. But I hope that we can take a fresh perspective into the year 5780, one of empowerment in the face of inevitable failure, free will in the midst of the status quo, and the constant potential for change when things feel stagnant. And may we go into the year 5780 with pure hearts and spirits, ready to partner with God in the ongoing project of repairing the world and repairing ourselves. Lev tahor barali Elohim, veruach nachon chadesh bekirbi. Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a willing spirit within me. Amen.